The draft is all about what happens at the top, and then me and Chris gonna do some moving and shaking to see if we can make us a deal here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure wherever you watch or listen, you tap in each and every day so you do not miss an episode of the show. A show like today that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm going to tell you what you're going to get today here on the show, the Jaguars and the Steelers draft strategies. I'm going to get Chris to tell me all about what Pittsburgh is planning. I'm going to tell you what I hope the Jaguars do, and Chris might not like it because it might end up with us taking a player that he likes. The Patriots, they picked fourth in a really, really good spot, I think. It's just hard to figure out what Mike Vrabel is going to do. We'll examine that and see what's best. But we're going to take it from the top of the NFL draft, talking about first the top three picks, and then the fourth pick with the Patriots, and the fifth pick involving the Jaguars. So let's get right down to it. Mr. Carter, how you doing today? And you ready to go do some drafting, dog?
Oh, let's do it, man. This is the part of the year where finally, like, you're not crazy for doing a mock. You're crazy for doing a mock, anytime before the season's over. You got a little bit of issues if you're doing one as soon as the season's over. But now it's like, okay, now you can actually see where the teams have, they filled their holes in free agency. They've made their trades. All right, who actually needs what? And now it's time to have that kind of fun. So this is always a fun time of year.
It starts at the top. Tyler Roland, everybody kind of knows what they're going to do. I don't think anybody believes that Cam Ward will not be the pick, but Tyler says you got to do this in multiple ways. There's something else they need over there in Tennessee. Listen to this.
Also, the Tennessee Titans are going to have a rookie number one pick at quarterback. You have to protect him. So even if you have Moore, Latham, Fant, and Charles Grant in the third round or fourth round, even if you have Skoronski, Zeitler, Hant, and Wyatt Millum, Donovan Jackson, Miles Frazier, even if you go with one of those guys and you have a surplus, so what? This team absolutely could use a surplus of decent offensive linemen. So when injuries inevitably happen, you're still covered and you still have a good offensive line. That should be the goal for the Tennessee Titans. Stack the offensive line without any reservations whatsoever. If that means having 4 interior offensive linemen and 4 tackles, all going into training camp thinking they're going to make the roster, then great. That's the kind of competition that makes a football team better. So I'm all over that. So please bring in George.
Look, I can't get mad at Tyler because he sounds like I sounded. I've been saying for years that the thing that the Jaguars failed to do was insulate Trevor Lawrence. Now, they tried. They used first-round picks, second-round picks, third-round picks on all of these dudes. But depending on one guy, depending on just your evaluation to protect your main asset, which is your franchise quarterback, Chris, I think it's lunacy. And I think the teams that go about it the right way and take the Jim Harbaugh approach that even offensive linemen are weapons, I think those are the teams that have lasting power and those quarterbacks have a better transition to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You want to set a good stage for your quarterback to arrive. Anyone that, in fact, that's one of our biggest topics on Locked On Steelers every day is talking about how, listen, this ain't the year to go get your quarterback. Next year's the year to go get your quarterback, but you need to set up the stage so that when you go get your quarterback, you have your O-line in place. You have playmakers. You have a system for the quarterback to just fall into where he doesn't have to make a whole lot of stuff up. You have a defense that backs him up, that gives him more chances to win games and doesn't end of the game isn't all on your quarterback's shoulders when they're a rookie trying to figure out how to even just play in the NFL. That's what the Steelers did for Ben Roethlisberger back in 2004. That's what they want to do for their quarterback in 2026. That's what most teams should try to do for their quarterback. You know, I think that's something that teams that succeed with their young quarterbacks, often it's because they gave them a good foundation to work with. You look at what Patrick Mahomes inherited. He inherited what Alex Smith was getting the Chiefs to the divisional round of the playoffs with, and that allowed him to get off to a hot start. So I look at what teams are trying to do, and oftentimes it's like, it's not just the work to go get the quarterback, it's making sure that the quarterback comes into a good situation that's going to allow them to succeed, thrive.
Yeah, and you make a great point, and you're probably going to change my mind when it comes to this. I always think people overanalyze a little bit of when they say, well, we can't get this because we don't have that. And a lot of the teams that say that aren't good at getting any of that stuff. So you mean tell me you're just going to sit here and try to cherry pick and pass up guys? But you make a very, very interesting point. Being a team that needs a young quarterback, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a prime example. Haven't they used a lot of day one and day two draft capital on their offensive line here in recent years?
Yeah. The last 2 years, with the first 2 years of Omar Khan's GM tenure with the Steelers, they've invested almost exclusively in the offensive line in the early rounds. 2024 or 2023, it was Broderick Jones in the first round. They traded up to get him. Then last year in 2024, they got Troy Faltano. So they got both their offensive tackles in back-to-back first-round picks, and then they got their center, Zach Frazier, in the second-round pick last year. So that's 3 guys that they project to be long-term answers on their offensive line moving forward. But that's part of very much what they wanted to do, was to reset things, something that they think the Eagles did a very good job with. That's why they took Andy Weidel out of the Eagles organization, made him their director of pro personnel or scouting. He's basically Omar Khan's right-hand man when it comes to talent evaluation, and the moves that they're making, the boards that they put together, they're very much like what the Eagles did to beef up the trenches on both sides of the ball. That's why I think the Steelers, we'll talk about this later, that's why I think the Steelers are going D-line this year as a priority high in this draft. But again, for me, like if you're a team that's drafting a young quarterback, you need to protect that quarterback. I think that's the biggest thing that, for example, why the Bengals haven't won a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow yet. He's always under siege. His offensive line has never been great. It's never been even really good. And he's missed he's missed the majority of 2 seasons at least at this point. And I think that they've correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's been in the league 5 years, and they've missed the playoffs 3 times. Yep. But a big part of it is they need to be able to protect him, and I think that's something like they have other building blocks in place. They got 2. They have maybe the baddest wide receiver combination in the NFL, but if you don't have other things in place, it's tough to get your quarterback going.
Some people just don't do things well. I'm gonna tell you something. Everybody, I've even talked about Green Bay and their quarterback fortune ever since, like, before I was even born, right, with Bart Starr. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, not only with the coaches, they've had 3 coaches in my whole life. Yep. They keep hitting home runs at center. I just really thought about what you said when you mentioned Zach Frazier, and I'm thinking like, okay, Pouncey, okay, before him, Damani Dawson, okay, wait a minute, Webster. I'm like, damn, Pittsburgh has hit some centers, man, in the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't hit on Kendrick Green a few years ago, but they certainly have a great history. I mean, you might say that the Steelers have the best history at center. When you look at Mike Webster, who for the longest time was some people considered maybe the greatest offensive lineman in history. But then you draft Dermontti Dawson, who to me was maybe the most athletic center in history. I mean, I remember Dermontti Dawson pulling and hitting guys 20 yards downfield for Cordell Stewart and like running stride for stride with guys like him. He was just a very impressive player. And then you draft Marquise Pouncey, who, I don't think he's on the caliber of Webster and Dawson, but he was an all-pro player for the better part of a decade. I think he was on the all-decade team in 2010s for being the best center of that era. So, they've hit him. And Zach Frazier had a strong man. I thought he would be good. Center has been a very strong position for the Steelers. But, offensive tackle, actually, if you were to build out an all-time Steelers roster, the biggest weakness would be offensive tackle. And I think that's why they've tried to get that right with these early picks, because in today's NFL, tackle is so important both for the run game and the pass game. And if they can get top-level talent at those positions on top of it with everything else they're doing, I think it'll go a long way to making them the kind of offense that they want to be, both physical and protective of their quarterback.
And we're going to get to somebody who loves offensive linemen. That will be Mike Vrabel, who is a big offensive line guy. We're going to take a look at picks 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to get to 5 and try to work some magic. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute Major League Baseball showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup this time of year especially. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until I found Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you can see the total cost up front, new surprises at checkout. Last-minute deals is the deal, man. That is where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, concerts, theater, anything you think about. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're rolling along here on Locked On NFL with my man CC Chris Carter, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and of course, Locked On Steelers. Let's go and stay in the division. Let's go up to AFC North. The Browns pick second. Everyone has almost gone to consensus now that ain't no way they're letting Travis Hunter get away. They ain't gonna let Travis Hunter get away. It just seems like now, after the 3-minute video that I saw, the love fest from Cleveland's GM talking about how Travis Hunter was even more impressive than Charles Woodson and more impressive than Champ Bailey. It just seems like that's the pick now, man. I think Travis Hunter is coming to the AFC North.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they picked him there. I wondered about Abdul Carter to pair, Myles Garrett with a potential generational pass rusher, and you could have both of those guys there. And then you presume by the time Abdul Carter's rookie contract would be up, that Myles Garrett would be getting ready to end his career, and then you could just pass the torch there while also letting them play next to each other. I mean, hey, the Browns could be in a really great position to get two guys that look like one of two guys that could be a generational talent on the defensive side of the ball. That certainly would be a very interesting prospect for them to get there. I really like Travis Hunter. I know that there's some people that have drawbacks because they feel like, oh, well, he played both ways in college. How impressive is that going to be? Listen, if he's doing that in college, he's going to light it up in the pros. I don't care what anybody says. That man's going to be a star. Yeah, I think the Browns. I think as long as Cam Ward's not on the table, if they go Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, I find it hard for them to lose in that situation.
Yeah, me too. And my Friday host, Matt Williamson, who you see him all the time up in Pittsburgh, Matt says he always plays this little game. Find the yellow jacket. Find that gold jacket, right? So you got Myles Garrett. If you think the gold jacket is, if there's one guy that's going to make it out of this groove, is Travis Hunter. Now you get two freakazoids on your team at one time. Here's Spencer German talking a little bit more about the draft and what Cleveland needs to be thinking about.
And the reason I lean Hunter over Carter now, there's a couple things here. A, the playing both sides of the ball thing is too intriguing. Not to, like, if you're deciding between those two guys, take the guy that can do multiple things for you. That's more versatile. That can play defense if you need him, but that you also want on the offensive side of the ball because this team needs a wide receiver. I also think, like, the conversations that have come up about Carter, like, there's been a lot more talk lately that he's like this generational talent, and that term gets thrown around too loosely, I think, these days, especially this time of year. I don't think this draft has anybody that is like a slam dunk, can't miss, generational talent, whatever the phrase you want to use it. I think Hunter's probably a little closer to the generational player tab, if for nothing else, because he has a chance to be like the Shohei Ohtani of the NFL and like completely change the game if he's actually able to pull off playing both ways.
Yeah, I think Travis is pretty close. And I guess my high school recruiting bias is why I feel that way, because he was 16 years old, man. He was the best high school player in the country. He was a junior in high school. So, and now he's had great coaching, great media preparation. And what, to me, the thing that people keep missing out on, what it just shows me is the dude just loves football. He loves the game, and coaches are going to eat that up in the National Football League, Chris.
No, certainly. Loving football is a big part of this. I don't know if Travis Hunter is going to play both ways in the NFL. I think that's a lot to ask. I don't think it's going to be the versatility. I think it's the elite presence that he can bring as a cornerback. His skills as a receiver are certainly noted, and maybe you can flex him into some positions in your offense to do that. But in the NFL, listen, if he does that in the NFL, it's a whole other thing. But the thing is that if he does that in the NFL, he's also probably going to wear himself out a lot faster, and you don't want to do that in the NFL. There's, when I talk to NFL players, there's aging, and then there's aging in the NFL. It's like, I know guys that are my age in the NFL, but when we joke around about like aches and pains, their aches and pains are a lot worse than mine. I'm 36, but it's different for me because I'm 36, but I lived like a normal person life where I go to the gym here and there. I do my thing. I work a job that, does not require extreme athleticism or hurting myself over and over and over. When you play football, you're going to have all sorts of extra aches and pains, even if you retire at like 28. So it's a whole other ball game there. And so for Travis Hunter, I'm thinking do I want, if I'm a coach drafting him, if I'm a GM and a coach drafting him to be a guy that's going to take over, for my franchise, I want him for 10 years. I want him for 12 years. I don't want him for 4 years and I wore him out because I used him on both sides of the ball. So I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to be, I thought for a while he would be a corner simply because I think that Travis Hunter can be a very good wide receiver. I think he can be an elite corner with his skill set. And I think that's where he'd excel the most. And I mean, hey, you pair him with Denzel Ward in that secondary, and then you still have Myles Garrett. I mean, there's a lot to work with what the Browns want to do there.
Man, those things go hand in hand. I agree with you. I think in order to be a very, very good corner, you have to rep it all the time. You ain't just going to line up against Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and you ain't rep that all week, and you haven't gotten your steps. And I know there's all this talk about T-stepping and all of that between Deion Sanders and Asante Samuel. Whatever the letter is that you got to do, you better practice it over and over when you're going to be dealing with those dudes. All right, the Giants, let's get to them here in this second segment. Man, speaking of Hunter, Patricia Traina was even talking about Travis Hunter on her show. Let's see what she had to say about Travis Hunter. I don't think he's going to get to the Giants, but it's good to do your research. Check out my girl, Patty.
Where does he excel at cornerback, and where is he still kind of, developing that part of his game?
Yeah, I think most people view him as a generational corner and then a Pro Bowl receiver, which, I mean, for that to be your sort of ceiling as a receiver or your entry into the NFL, a Pro Bowl as a rookie, I feel like that's pretty good, but he's viewed as a generational corner. A lot of people would go back to, I would say my favorite moment of him is against UCF. So they were playing UCF. He was in a zone coverage and he perfectly baited the quarterback into throwing to what looked like a wide open tight end and then came virtually off the screen if you were watching on TV and made a diving interception. So he's great in coverage. I don't really think there's anything to work on for him except just man coverage against bigger receivers, right? He's not the biggest guy, and so I think he's just going to have to get a little stronger. That being said, he's a great corner. I just personally like him as a receiver better, but I don't think there's a lot of room for him to grow. There's a reason that Richard Sherman, I think Patrick Surtain, and other corners before him have said we want him as a corner because he's that good. It's just he happens to play two of football's most difficult positions, and he happens to be really great at both of them.
I think offensively, he kind of reminds me of Ocho a little bit. And that's pretty damn good. He's a little smaller, but he plays with that same kind of plays like his feet are on fire and he catches with his hands and he seems like he gets skinny really. Yeah, he does, man. And I also think at corner, I think they're dead on. I think the thing is at corner, he can get lost because people might stop throwing the ball over there, kind of like they did Prime sometimes, because if he catches it, he's going the other way with it. Now he turns into a wide receiver, man, and he can be real, real dangerous in the league.
He could be. I think there's a lot of potential for that. And there's a chance for that. And again, I think that he could be a very good wide receiver. I just think he's a better corner. It's just in my opinion. And both of those positions are of key points for the Steelers or for anyone. Excuse me, the key points for any franchise that you build there. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Well, what they did in free agency in New England, let's get to them real quick. Do you believe that this is a no-brainer that Mike Vrabel is going to continue to address the offensive line? Do you think he's going to be pulled into getting Genty maybe, or Ted McMillan to give that young quarterback another weapon? How do you think New England's going to move? Because I think they hold one of the keys to the draft now that we kind of think we know what Cleveland's going to do.
I've been one again. I think you protect your quarterback. If you believe Will Campbell is that guy, go get him. I think that's where you got to look at. But you got to start building with Drake May. I do expect them to take an offensive player. The question will be: do they think Ted McMillan's that guy? Do they think Will Campbell's that guy? Do they trade back and let someone else make that decision so they can get another pick somewhere to continue building with that? The Patriots need to be open to things. I think offensive line would be the move. Get a dominant offensive line. Make them part of the fold. And start, putting that together. If you think Will Campbell out of LSU's the guy, go get your man.
There's some people that said this week, they said if they take Will Campbell, that's like taking Matt Light, that's a pretty good career. That's a pretty damn good career, man. I think everybody thinks these draft picks all have to be all pros or like I was just talking a minute ago about finding a guy in a yellow jacket. But if you get somebody that has a Matt Light type career where you can win championships and he can protect the blind side of the greatest quarterback of all time, to me, you did your job. All right. We're going to assume that the players that are gone are Ward, Travis at 2, number 3. We're going to give the Giants Abdul Carter. How about that? We'll give the Giants Abdul Carter at 3, 4, Will Campbell. All right, the Jaguars are up at 5. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some business with Chris. That's what we're going to do in the third and final segment. I'm going to do some business with Chris. It's going to be very interesting because it goes right along with what I said today on Locked On Jaguars. I'll do it in just a second. All right, so here's what's happening. The Jaguars are up. I'm not going to play a video of my mug from Locked On Jaguars because y'all see me here every day on the barbershop. But I will tell you, I think I want to go on the move, right? I want to move. And I need to get in front of Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh wants Kenneth Grant. I'm going to tell y'all right now, they want Kenneth Grant. And that's who I want the Jaguars to take. So I don't think I can go past like 16 where Arizona is, but I'm going to move back twice. I'm going to move back, say, from 5 to like 10 and get an extra second-round pick. And then I'm going from 10 to like 16 and get another third or maybe a third and a fourth and send them a 6 back. And I'm going to park right there. Chris, what would you offer me to come up to 16 so you can take Kenneth Grant in front of me? Because I'm going to tell you right now, that's who I'm sitting there to take.
Maybe a 4th or a 5th. I think here's the thing. The Steelers love Kenneth Grant. I'm telling you right now, Kenneth Grant is a guy that they love. He fits what they're trying to do. He has the mentality that you want. But there's another guy that they really like that if you take Kenneth Grant at 16, I think they'll be happy taking at 21. That's Derek Harmon out of Oregon.
Oh,
when I talked to both of those guys, those were the 2 defensive tackles that I thought would reasonably be with the defensive tackle is a priority for the Steelers in this draft class. And those are the 2 defensive tackles that I thought if they were at 21, the Steelers would be like, "Yep, we are happy. We're not moving. We'll take one of these guys right here, right now, and go to bed happy on Thursday night." I think that Kenneth Grant is the priority, but if they don't get him, Derek Harmon's the move. And I've been saying that for a while on my show. I know some people really believe in Walter Nolan. I think Nolan a little bit less, but just talking to these guys, I talked to all 3 of those guys at the combine. Derek Harmon really impressed me with how he perceives the game, how he talks about the game, how he works on the game. Those things are there. So I might offer if I'm the Steelers, I might offer a 4th to move up because the thing is they've already given away a 2nd-round pick for their DK Metcalf trade. Yeah, so they don't. I don't think they can give away their 3rd-round pick this year right now, but they might give you something there, Tony, to try to move up to make sure that they get Kenneth Grant. But that best believe that is a priority. And heck, when it won't be a shocker when you see the Locked On NFL mock draft come out.
I know it, right? So I'm gonna tell you something, man. Peter Bukowski can be my witness. I did it in a private conversation. I compared Harmon to Stephon Tuitt, but I said he's Stephon Tuitt with more versatility to go inside because Harmon can also play outside. He can be a 5 technique too. And to me, that's what he is. And we forget about how good Tuitt was, and those injuries derailed his career. But he's a real good player, man. And I think that's the kind of guy. Harmon doesn't fit with it. I think the Jaguars probably like him, but I think they need a nose tackle. I think we need a nose tackle. I think Pittsburgh can kind of get away with, Harmon actually did play a little bit more inside at 0-1 than we know. You can watch the tape. But yeah, man, I think it's interesting with the Jags. I did this today on my local show, Chris. I just got this strange feeling they're going to move, man. I talked to Liam. We were all at the press conference yesterday, and make no mistake about it, they want somebody who's going to play now. I asked them a question about whether or not you got a guard against drafting a guy who's going to help you in 2025, but it may not be the best thing for the future. He said, well, you always have an eye for the future, but he said, but make no mistake about it. We had 3 or 4 guys come in early last year for Tampa, and they helped us, and we're looking for some guys who come in and help us right now. So defensive tackle is one of those positions, kind of like running back, where dudes don't have a big transition to the National Football League, man. I think those are probably the 2 positions where you can get some help right away, and guys will come in and be able to help you quicker than you thought.
It can both be that, but it can also be a long-term projection, right? Like Cam Hayward, who's the Steelers' star defensive tackle right now. When he came to the NFL, he was very much appreciated, liked. He did a lot of good things, but he didn't become the elite Cam Hayward, I'd say, until like the mid-2010s. Like, because he was drafted in 2010. Like, that's also how long he's been in the league. He's actually like my age. So comparing bodies and everything. But when you look at Cam Hayward and what he did over his career, Cam was always a very good defensive lineman. He became an elite one in like year 6 or 7, and then has just been that for pretty much a decade now. Like, I'd say 2015 is when I thought he really ascended, and he just hasn't relinquished that since. And I think that stuff, and like you brought up Stephon Tuitt, I tell people all the time, the Steelers, like, the people don't understand how much of a miracle it is that the Steelers have not fallen apart as a franchise to being a bottom of the league team after the player exodus they had. They didn't just lose Antonio Brown for being the best receiver in the NFL for 6 years. They didn't just lose Le'Veon Bell for being an all-pro running back. They didn't just lose their franchise quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. They also lost all-pro center Marquise Pouncey. They also lost all-pro guard David DeCastro. Both of those guys retired before that they were expecting them to because of injuries and wear down in their careers. But then you also add in the paralysis of Ryan Shazier, who was their best player on defense and was changing everything. They were a top 5 unit when he was on the field. They dropped down to just being outside the top 10 when he was off the field. It changed everything they did there. And then Stephon Tuitt was probably the last really big loss there, because when they drafted Tuitt, I believe in the same year that they drafted Shazier and they signed him to a long-term deal, he was supposed to be the next Cam Hayward. Like, right now, the Steelers were supposed to have 2 mammoth space-eating, pass-rushing defensive tackles that were dominating the middle of their defense. And ever since Tuitt retired, both because of injuries and because of the unfortunate situation with his brother, because of those two that situation happening, the Steelers have been scrambling to try to find an other elite. Like, their whole defense was supposed to be built off of having 2 elite defensive tackles in the middle of their group. Now they're trying to develop Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin into something like that. I think that he has a lot of potential and they like what he's doing, but they don't have that true nose, which is why I keep banging the table for a Kenneth Grant or a Derek Harmon, who I think could be in there and become that. Like, I think you compared him to Stephon Tuitt. I'll tell you right now, I talked to Derek Harmon, and at the combine, he said the 2 guys that he studies the most in the NFL are Cam Hayward and Chris Jones, because those are the guys he thinks that he can play with, or play like, with his size and skill set. So for me, that's why I'm banging the table for DT. And this is also a great defensive tackle year. Like, even if you wait to the later round, you get an Alfred Collins, or like even later rounds, you get an Aeneas Peebles. There are just so many intriguing defensive tackles in this class, from run stuffers to pass rushers, that I would be taking. I would not be shocked if the Steelers double dipped at defensive tackle. I also think that if you're a smart defense and you need help on the inside, whether that's pressure in your depth and your depth chart at defensive tackle for pass rushing downs, or just straight up starting talent, there's plenty of that in this draft class. Go get you one.
Go get it. You gotta go get it. I think this year, running back, defensive tackle, I think teams sitting there in the 3rd round, man, they're going to look at it and it's going to look like gold. Jamari Caldwell's another guy. Josh Farmer. It's a lot of dudes that can plug the middle of these defenses. You want to find out more about all of them, make sure you tap into Locked On NFL Draft, where Damian Parsons and Coach Keith Sanchez break that down like nobody else. Nobody's business, man. Go over there and check that out and get to know all of these names. Mr. Carter, as usual, go get them. Don't hurt nobody up there in Pittsburgh. We thank you for joining us here on Locked On NFL on a Thursday. They're pressure washing my house, so if y'all hear some crazy noises, that's what it is. It ain't nothing going on with my stomach. All right, man. We'll holler at y'all later. Take care.